Sorry, here, am I on now? Oh, check, one, all right. Before we get started, real quick, as you can see, we are moving, and so we're trying to give you every reminder that this is happening in 4 weeks, and so you can start inviting your friends and being a part of that, but that'll happen 4 weeks from today. It's on September 21st and 22nd. If you're new today and you don't know what's going on, we've actually set up kind of a booth out in our lobby called our Move booth, and so if you need more information about that, please stop by there and check that out. For everybody, though, pick up one of these. These are just a little brochure pamphlet that tells you what's going on when we go over there, everything about kind of that first month, everything from, when it starts, and the opening weekend we're having baptisms. And so if you've not been baptized following your salvation, this is a great opportunity. We want you to do that this opening weekend. It's going to be an awesome time for us to celebrate the changed lives that God has wrought through His Word and through the gospel and at Foothill Church, and we want to celebrate with you. And all you have to do is check the box in the front of the connection card that Pastor Stephen referenced to that says you want to be baptized, you want more information about being baptized, and we'll get a hold of you and answer any questions you have about how that works. So that's on opening weekend. And then on Saturdays, we're actually having food trucks for the first month that are going to be over there. And then the first weekend in October, the APU Gospel Choir will be joining us, and that'll be a lot of fun. We've never done anything like that. So it's going to be a great opening month over there. I hope you plan on joining us and inviting your friends, your family to come as we just move around the corner. And again, if you've not been there, literally you go down to Baseline Road, turn left, go 2 blocks, and you are at our Christian school campus, and we're going to be setting up in the gym there, and things are coming together really well. We pretty much finished up the family room. We'll get finished up this week. More of the install stuff happens, and we are almost ready to go. So we're excited about what's ahead and want you to be a part of that. If you haven't made a pledge to the move and you want to, then there are cards in front of your chairs, and then there's also some out at the Move Center, and you can make pledges. These are 2-year pledges that we're making to help with the cost of that move. It's about a $550,000 bill for us, and so many people have already stepped up and gotten involved. About $160,000 has come in, and we praise God for that. And so if you are one of those who have made pledges and you can begin to fulfill your pledge, then we would love that, and we thank God for that, okay? All right, well, that's all I want to say about that this morning, and I have a group of people I dearly love. This is my family, and some of you know who they are, and some of you don't, and so we're here to try and answer questions. And I want to just preface that this morning by saying we're not up here as experts. Michelle and I are up here as people who are trying, like you, as parents, to be faithful parents, godly parents, gospel-centered parents. We don't do it perfectly, and we've told our kids, hey, where we don't do it perfectly, and if somebody asks a question, answer it honestly, and we're okay with people knowing that their parents are not, and this family isn't perfect, and we don't always know what we're doing. We're pleading and begging with God for wisdom, just like you. And so, but to the extent that we can be helpful, then you get a chance to ask your questions. There's a number on the screen that you can text, and then they'll throw your question up on the screen. Hopefully, we can get to as many as possible. But why don't we just go down the row and introduce yourself, say your name and how old you are, so everybody kind of gets an idea of what we're looking at. Okay, go ahead.
I am Gabby, and I am 19.
I am Tucker, and I am 17.
I'm Berkeley, and I'm 14.
I'm Gracie, and I'm 11.
And I'm Michelle, and I have a birthday coming up in September, but I'm not going to tell you how old I am. You can guess if you want to. And if you guess the right number, then we'll be friends forever. So.
Yeah. So this is going to be a lot of fun. We do this we do this about once a year. We various people, we take questions, and it gives you a chance to kind of get immediate interaction on something. So if you have questions about parenting, anything, we will do our best, and to the extent our kids have something to say, I'll kind of field the questions and then toss it to them when appropriate, okay? So why don't we just go ahead and dive right in, and let's see what the first question is. I'm a child. How do I know the boundary of when to call my parents out on things I see as problems in their marriage or personal traits? So, okay, so guys, if you see something in mom and dad that you're like, that's not right, what do you do? How do you do it? Gabby, why don't we start with you? What would you do?
Okay. I think obviously with parents, it's much more, you have to be much more careful about how you approach them, because there's a level of respect that they deserve. But I think you have to be honest with them, and you have to be willing to say, look, I see this in you, but it's a little more, there's a lot more like respect there. I mean, there's a little more of a boundary there. I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to say here.
That's all right.
Yeah, you just have to be much more respectful about how you don't approach them like you would a buddy.
Let's do it this way. So
Yeah.
Gabby, there's been times when you've had to come to me and be like, Daddy, I don't think that was fair. I don't like how that was handled. So what did you do? Did you just come in blasting with both barrels, or?
You think about what you want to say before you say it, and you think about what made you angry. You think about what it is that you want to say to your parents before. Obviously, everything comes before you actually say what you want to say. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I think, and I would say, as a parent, you need to recognize that one of the chief instruments for sanctification in your life is your children, your wife, your spouse, and your children. And that's not to give your kids permission to call you out and tell you, you're terrible and to be disrespectful to you. But I think they need to be respectful. But I've given my kids the right that and Michelle has, when they see things that are upsetting, or they feel like we're not sort of falling in line with what Scripture would say, then they should have the right to tell me in a respectful way. They should have a right to tell Michelle. Doesn't mean we always receive it well, parents, but we if we hear it and it's the truth, then we need to say, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. And the truth of the matter is, you're going to say sorry to your kids, I don't know, 1,000,000 times in your life because of the mistakes that you'll make. And so I think that's good. And so this child who's asking, the very fact that you would ask, that's great. And I would assume your parents are Christian, because it might look differently if your parents are not Christian. If they don't have the Holy Spirit residing within them, then it's going to be very difficult for you to talk to them about biblical values. It's going to be very difficult to talk about how a Christian behaves, right? But I think any child should be able to say to any parent, there's some out of bounds areas, even if you're not a Christian, that I think we should be able to respect. So, okay? So the next one. How do you balance discipline and the rods, that'd be spanking, and having mercy and grace with your kids the way God does with us? Well, Michelle, why don't you go with that one?
Get the hard one right away. All right. Well, the Bible does talk about the rod. In fact, it says the rod, that foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction will drive it from him. And in fact, I have to tell you, everyone knows, we have the rod of correction. Now, it hasn't been used for a long time. It's really dusty. It's sitting in my kitchen drawer. But we did, in our home, have the rod of correction. And we did spank, we did use it. But you hear the key verse there. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. We're talking the difference between foolishness and childishness. Childishness is spilling a glass of milk. Foolishness is open rebellion to a parent. And that takes different shapes and forms when your kid is 2 and when your kid is 14, whatever the ages may be. And that is actually a great question, because there has to be a balance. If there isn't a balance, it's called child abuse. And if it goes the other way and you're not willing to discipline with the rod and with strict measures, it's not really mercy and grace at that point, it's permissiveness. So there has to be a balance. So what we did in our home is we followed that mandate that we would spank or use the rod of correction when there was open rebellion with our kids. If we specifically asked them not to do something and they did it, we used the rod of correction. We also did, though, employ what we've tried to do, and especially as they get older, it gets a little easier, to use the punishment fits the crime methodology. One of the things that is this sounds probably bad, but my favorite punishment fits the crime is, I think we can have favorites. It didn't hurt them or anything. It was unpleasant, but it didn't hurt them. Is when they would say a word that wasn't appropriate in our home. And when your kids are little, the S word is either stupid or shut up. So when they would say that at home, I would give them a teaspoon of vinegar. Now, vinegar is not poisonous, and it actually is good for you. So I didn't feel too bad about making them taste vinegar. But the punishment fit the crime, because the words they used, or if they spoke unkindly to one another, the words that they used were unkind, right? So I wanted them to see the bitterness of their words. We did try soap once, but that was gross for me too. So I was like, forget that. But But vinegar, I think it worked pretty well, other than the fact that they don't really like vinaigrette on salads, but whatever. Anyway, I think that that's really important, though, to have that balance. And I do think that the rod is really important. You cannot reason with a 2-year-old. You really can't. We try. I know a lot of parents like that idea. It doesn't work because they understand more action than they do the words. Now, again, the mercy is as your kids get older, you can put away the, that physical part and move more toward reasoning. But it all goes back to, even the question that was asked before, it all goes back to relationship. If you're not willing to have a relationship with your child, to communicate with them and communicate lovingly to them, then any of the discipline that you try to mete out with them isn't going to work either. It has to be both of those things together, or it's just not going to work.
And by the way, grace and mercy doesn't mean you sweep sin under the carpet. Right. And you go like, I'll just pretend that didn't happen. That's not grace. That's not biblical grace. Grace is always costly. It costs somebody something. Okay, grace wasn't just God going, I'll forget sin and we'll sweep it under the carpet of the universe. Somebody paid for that sin, either Jesus or you, right? So when we talk about giving our kids grace, somebody in some ways has to bear that punishment, if you will. And sometimes parents, what it means to be gracious is not to sweep it under the carpet. It may mean that you have to clean up the mess. You have to, and your kids need to understand that, okay? This is not, we talked about it last week. Grace and mercy are free for the receiver. They're not free for the giver. And so you've got to recognize that we don't just walk away and go, we'll just pretend, we don't want conflict in our home, so we'll just pretend like that didn't happen. That doesn't help anybody. That's not going to help your kids. That's not going to help you. They need to know if something bad happened, somebody's going to pay for that. Okay, so daddy's going to eat that, and you need to know that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it for you. And then they, okay, I see what's happening here, but I'm doing it. I'm not going to hold it over your head. This isn't something about me going, remember I did that back, I did that for you 5 times, whatever. That's not that. It's saying I'm going to do this because I love you. And I want to do this because I want you to see the grace of God in action. Okay?
Hey, Chris, can you just have Gabby or Tucker also, I think it'd be helpful to hear from a child's perspective to explain like when that time happened of that kind of correction. To
Spanking?
Like
When spanking happened?
Yeah. When, that if they could describe what that process, was
What did it feel like, Gabby? No, I'm kidding.
No, but because grace and mercy were not, it wasn't like it was one or the other, you see. It's all together. Yeah. It's not just like, now I'm going to spank you so there's no grace and mercy. There is grace and mercy within that type of correction, but I wanted maybe one of them to explain that.
I actually, when this question was asked, I thought of a story. One time, one of us needed to be punished, and we'd done something wrong. But actually, my mom, and this was like the first time she'd ever done it, she decided that she's going to let that child spank her. And I thought that was really just a cool, it wasn't like it's really cool way of showing just God's mercy, Jesus' mercy on the cross for us. And I think that was what Mom was trying to show us in that child in that moment, that she wanted to show God's mercy.
Was spanking, from your perspective, were we out of control?
Not at all.
Did you feel unloved? No. I mean, the moment you're like, I don't like this, right? But yeah, so I mean, I think what you would hear if we really, could sort of rewind the videotape, what you'd see, I mean, Michelle, you cry. I mean, it's a horror. You don't want to spank your kids. Who wants to spank their kid? But you do it because you realize, look, here's the issue, biblically, I think. The Bible says in Hebrews that who God loves, he disciplines. The way you know you're a genuine child is discipline. You go read that passage in Hebrews. God is not saying, when I discipline, I make you stand in the corner. Discipline is God going, there's the timeout chair. It is physical discipline on his people. They are suffering because of sin. And when we remove the physicality of discipline from our children as little children, we give them no ability to understand that sin is horrible and grace is magnificent. You cannot understand the gospel unless you first understand that sin is terrible. Right? I mean, it's like, well, that's what God's supposed to do. He's supposed to forgive me. He's supposed to be gracious. God's supposed to be merciful. No. None of us deserve mercy. All of us deserve death, hell, punishment. God saves us, though. And until you understand the bad news, you don't understand the good news. In some ways, what you're teaching your kids is there's bad news. There's bad news that sin causes pain. But there's grace and mercy afterwards, and we love you and we forgive you, but you need to feel that at a young age so you'll avoid the sin. I don't know how we understand the wrath of God with that. I don't know how we display that to our kids. You understand the wrath of God is not out of control rage. God is saying there's wrath coming, it's building, and someday it's going to be poured out upon humanity. But when we feel the wrath of God, when we feel God's discipline on us as Christians, it's not out of control. God's not just going off on us in anger, and I get delight in this, and I love punishing my children. That's not God. And if you feel that way and you enjoy it, you shouldn't do it. If you feel that way and you're kind of like, I got to get out this anger that I feel, do not. That is abuse. You don't slap. You don't, in some ways, I've said before, God gave a perfect place on your child for a spanking, and it's not their leg, and it's not their back and their arms, it's right on their bottom, okay? And you aim for there, and you don't go anywhere else, and I mean this. That's where a spanking should happen, okay? Anything else, I feel like, listen, slapping that's humiliation. That's just, I want to take you down. And so you spank, and we used what Michelle called a rod of correction, and we did it because we wanted to sort of not be our hand that they felt it from. And it was, when you say, well, what did you do? I mean, it was probably maybe 3 swats on the bottom. Okay, they weren't out of control. I wasn't like, let me wind up back to, Azusa and then come down on you, right? I mean, it was slap, 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 right? They didn't love it. I didn't love it. We'd cry. We would hug. I hate doing that to you, but you need to know, Daddy loves you, and I don't want you to do that. And you need to know that sin is terrible, and this is where it leads you, is into pain, okay? So if you have questions about that, I mean, we can certainly talk about that offline as well, all right? All right. Next question. Are the 2 youngest siblings going to work at Chick-fil-A? Yeah. I don't know. Next question. All right. How do you handle your teenager not wanting to go to church, dress appropriately, do homework? I want their heart to be changed and not just compliance. This is a great question. Let me throw the question back to you and some parents when you say, my kid doesn't like to come to church. Does your kid like to go to school? Do they bounce out of bed and go, yeehaw, I get to go to do math today? But you do it, don't you? You say, well, you don't have a choice. You say, well, that's because the law would come pick up my child and call him a truant. Do you really tell your child that? The reason you're going to school today is because the law requires, and there's going to be a policeman at our door if you don't. I doubt it. I bet what you say is, you don't have a choice. You live in my home. You're going to school. Okay, I think there is a point in your child's life where you say to them, look, you live in my home. We're going to church. It's just like school. I don't ask you if you want to go. This is not a democracy. Okay? This is a benevolent dictatorship, and I'm the man. Okay? And that's what it is. And you're going to church. Now, there's going to come a day when they get out of your house. They may never come back to church again. They may never go back to school again. But you've done everything you can. Now, here's one of the reasons, perhaps, that some people have a problem when their kids get to be teenagers. Okay? If you will think of parenting as a funnel, okay, think of a funnel, now turn it upside down. There's a thin part at the bottom, and it slowly opens this way, right? When your kids are young, there are very strict boundaries around them. They don't date when they're 4, right? They're not partying with their friends. They're probably not doing sleepovers. They're going to bed at a certain time. They're eating certain foods. There's all kinds of restrictions on kids that are young kids, right? But as they get older, you let the funnel out. Okay, and so that by the time they are in their teenage years, they're starting to be able to make some decisions for themselves. Okay, so my kids are in birth order right now. Okay, so Gabby's the oldest down to Gracie the youngest. There's things that that Gabby can do that Tucker can't, that Berkeley can't, that Gracie can't, right? And it sort of goes that way. Here's what I feel like happens. Our kids are so darn cute. I'm not saying, yeah, they are, but your kids, right? All of us, they're just wonderful. Oh my gosh, everything they do is darling. And so they're in your home and they are making a wreck of things and everybody's like, that is so cute. That's just that terrible twos, right? And what you've done is you have taken the funnel and now it's like wide and you just let that kid do anything. And you go out to dinner and people around you are like, we hate it when you come to this restaurant because you're annoying. But you're like, oh, this is a cute little kid and they're funny and that's what kids do and they're supposed to be misbehaving. We don't have any sort of strictures around them and the funnel is wide. What happens is they get older and suddenly you realize, okay, this is kind of out of control. This is the terrible twos. Well, the terrible twos turn into the, horrific fives and now, and so as they get older, I'm getting more annoyed. Now they're a teenager and they're just plain ticking me off and I don't like where they're headed and now I've got to squeeze down and make sure they don't go anywhere. And so I put all the restrictions around them. Parents, it's too late at that point. You've given them all the permission in their world the whole life and then they get to teenage years and they're like, no, turn it over. Turn it over. Do it now so that, listen, there's a reason that pretty much the only command in Scripture, Dad, Mom, the only command in Scripture, we talked about it 2 weeks ago, is children, obey your parents. That's your job, is a child's job to his parent. And parent, the first thing you need to teach your child is obedience. Okay, and you teach them, you don't start teaching obedience when they're 15. You start teaching obedience when they're 15 minutes old. You start teaching it when they're 5 months old. You start teaching it immediately where they came into your life. They're now accepted into your home. You didn't come into their life. Your world doesn't revolve around them. Their world revolves around you. And that's what obedience is. So then when they get older, okay, so now I can look at Gabby and Tucker and yeah, do my kids like, oh, okay, I'm a pastor's kid. I got to go to church again. Yeah, of course. Of course. But they also know it's not a thing we negotiate about. Just like I don't negotiate with school. But it's funny to me that parents, you think your kids, and we all do, we all think our kids are brilliant. My kid's like 4.0. He's ridiculous. He's crazy smart. So he will sit and listen to a lecture in algebra for 50 minutes, but suddenly your kid becomes a moron when it comes to church. They go, oh, they can't. That's my kid's bored. They love algebra that much? Are they begging? No. So you say to them, there's certain places, and listen, until you get it where you go, their spiritual well-being outweighs their academic well-being 1,000,000 to 1. Then you're going to be like, school, but church, doesn't really need to be done. Okay, so you need to kind of understand that framework. This is what needs to happen. You are the authority in your home, and that authority starts when they're little, and then slowly you let the funnel out. Okay, and if you listen, you say, "Man, I've already jacked up. I've screwed up." You know what? Okay, go to your child if they're a teenager and say, "I've screwed up, and I'm sorry." And I haven't been the kind of dad or mom that I need to be. And now let's work on this together, okay? Because I see you going some places and doing some things that are very concerning of me. And I need to have rules in my home. And there are some things you have to do. And church is one of them. And homework is one of them. And we've got to work on this together. Or you're headed toward a miserable, miserable life, okay? Can we go
Just
ahead.
one more thing.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a lot, right? The heart versus, and I love that last part of the question, that you want their heart to change and not just compliance. That's the tricky part, because you may not see the heart becoming compliant until way down the road. but it doesn't mean you're not faithful to do the outward things to try to help them move down that road. So again, the key is relationship and communicating with your teen in particular. And if you haven't had the like Chris said, if you haven't been able to grapple with those obedience issues, it's not too late for that. You start over again. And the great thing about a teenager is they can talk to you. Now, they may not always want to, but you can talk to them. And my suggestion is talk to them not in the moment when they're not dressing the way you want them to, or they're not doing their homework. When the tensions are high, take them out for a cup of coffee and talk about it in a very non-threatening situation. And just like Chris said, you go and apologize, you maybe repent as parents, but then you begin to talk and get to the heart of the matter. That's the only way the heart's going to change, is when you do get to the heart. So you ask them, why don't you want to come to church? Is it boring? Is it too long? Are you cold? You want to wear a sweater? And start talking to them about what are some of the reasons behind the why they're doing this. Why do you want to dress immodestly? Why do you want to do these things? And try to start pulling it out of them. Now, again, I'm not going to say they're going to be like, well, let me tell you, usually the answer sometimes is like, I don't know, just because. That doesn't mean you stop. That means you prayerfully keep going to them, but you go to them not on the attack, but on a mission. I'll just say to this for those that have teens, there's a really great book out there called Age of Opportunity. It's so convicting, I can only get to about chapter 3 till I start bawling and have to start it over again. But if some of you are really struggling with your teens, I would highly recommend getting that book and slogging it through. And it talks a lot about that, relationship and communication. And at that age, I'm kind of at that with all my kids now. The spankings are put away, and there's more talking about the why. It takes a lot of work, but here's the deal. You're going to either do a lot of work on the front end, or you're going to do a lot of work and you're going to be grieving the rest of your life. Yeah. So take the time to have good communication with your kids, whatever that's going to mean in your home.
And by the way, it's going to look different for every child. Right. Like I can look down the row here and I know they all communicate differently. Berkeley, maybe you can even talk how you said something the other day about, Mom and Dad, I wish you would sort of give us space, that whole thing. Yeah.
I think my parents are really good at loving us, and they're just good with our love languages. But one thing they need to do sometimes is, I think Gabby and Gracie, they really like Mom and Dad they like to tell Mom and Dad what's going on. But me and Tucker are sort of okay, we need some space. If something's an issue, we're going to go to our rooms and close the door. Just leave us alone. But
and then eventually it comes out. And you have to be, as a parent, you got to watch for windows of opportunity that God gives you to go, okay, wow, here it is. God just served it up to me, and it's not on my schedule. Sometimes it's listening for the cues in their hearts and what they want to talk about. Then they come to you and you start talking and going, remember the other day when, dads, moms, maybe you're, Michelle, I think both of us are this way. We want to attack the problem right now. Just be careful. Go to them, and if they're ready to talk, they're ready to talk. If they're not, as teenagers, you kind of back off and you let them and you pray, and God help them, and I pray they will come to me, and then, or there'll be an opportunity where we have a chance to talk about that. So, all right, let's go to another one. How do you explain to your teenager the principle of discernment so that her eyes will be open to the things of the world? How much do you expose your children to the things of the world for the sake of learning discernment? I don't think we just expose them to the things of the world. And I don't know exactly. Are we talking about movies? Are we talking about just, going out and walking on Sunset Strip, or, to the things of the world for the sake of learning discernment? I would say I don't know that we intentionally ever go, hey, everybody, tonight we're going to watch an R-rated movie because I think it teaches us a lot of good lessons and we can learn discernment. So I don't think that's ever happening. What I hope we do is that as they run into the things that the world serves up to them, we're trying to then teach them discernment through that. I don't know how else to answer that question.
Well, maybe there's issues about technology. Do you guys want to talk about that, Tucker? You want to talk about how like we were just talking about that the other day. Like as you get older, you make those decisions yourself. It's about the funnel. So the funnel is really small when they're little. Like you restrict what they watch, do whatever, and then you slowly let them go to that.
So maybe talk about what, Gracie has got certain things on up to Gabby and what we allow Gabby to do versus, go ahead. No, Tucker can talk about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So it just, everything is different now because we have an 11-year-old and we have a 19-year-old. So we have the 17 and 19-year-old who I'm getting to the point where I have to start making the decisions, but Gabby's at the point where she is making those decisions. She can go see any movie at the theater that she wants to. She can watch any TV show she wants to, but she makes the decision not to. Well, as Gracie, because she's younger, my parents are still making those decisions for her because they think she's too young to see this type of thing in a movie. And it sort of comes along with the same thing with the internet.
Yeah.
So, we don't really have a policy at our house for the internet, but if something comes up, obviously our parents would talk to us about it, but...
Yeah, so we're going to do something different with Gracie and Berkeley all the way up. You're trying to treat them, I think, according to their age. So discernment for us is going to be very much like, how can I help Gabby if Gabby goes to a movie that maybe I personally, if I was making the decision, would have said, Gabby, don't go to. I want her to go to those movies while she's still in my house because I want us to be able to talk about them if she's going to do that, right? I want us to be able to come back and go, hey, Gabby, so what'd you think? And let's talk about that. And she may come back and go, I should not have spent my money on that, right? Great. Okay, why? We can talk about that. Tucker, I might say, hey, Tuck, no, I don't think I'm going to let you do that with your buddies, but I'll let you do this. Berkeley, even more, and Gracie, not a chance, right? So I think it sort of goes on that scale, and that's honestly one of the most difficult things about having 4 children, having multiple kids in your home, is that learning. I've got to be parenting each of these differently, and so you're spinning the plates constantly, and that's a real challenge. So, okay, let's go to the next one. What's family's policy on dating? They have to be 65.
Never.
No. Okay, so dating, what we say is this, there is sort of a policy. Number one, we have this family saying that is what?
Dating is a waste of time.
Woo! Yeah. We started teaching them that cheer when they were 2. That's a waste of time, okay? So, yeah. But second of all, we tell our kids that somewhere around 17. Okay, now, there's a reason for that. But it's a little bit like cell phones in our family. Kids don't just get cell phones. They survived for 2,000 years without them. I think they can still survive. So they get them at a certain age, but that's also based on their own spiritual maturity. Now, let me suggest something to you. I'm going to look at it differently from a girl's standpoint than I am for Tucker. Because what I want for my girls, I want them to be ready to date. I want them to have strong convictions, all those sort of things. And what I want for Tucker is I want him to be ready to lead. Are you actually ready to take on the responsibility of a girl and be ready to lead her, not just to a movie and to a place to eat, but can you lead her spiritually? And if you're not, then you're not ready to date. So while I may say 17 might turn into 18. It might be a little earlier if I sense a real strong maturity there. But let me say this. I think the whole dating thing is funny in the sense that, I don't get the dating at early ages. I don't even know what it means. In fact, Gracie, why don't you, yeah.
Okay. I know, okay. It's a waste of time in 6th grade because you don't do anything. What? Yeah, you can't go anywhere. Your mom has to drive you places, which I think is pretty embarrassing because you're like, okay. And if you go on a date to a coffee shop, your mom has to wait outside and look on her phone and wait till you're done. I'm like, what? That's just weird. It's
So we should wait. Huh?
Yeah, just
So I mean,
Yeah.
so you got this young, and it's happening. I mean, we have kids that'll come home, or Gracie will find out, somebody at school, and they're dating. I'm like, what does it mean? What does it mean to be dating at 6th grade? But even this, like 16 years old. Let's say you say, well, now they can drive. Well, they can't drive anybody, as far as I understand the law, until they've had a license for a year. So even at 16, I'll meet you at the movie theater, and then your mom's gonna have to take you home. What's the point, right? So there's got to be. The ability to date is not just anatomical maturity. It is spiritual maturity. It is the ability to provide financially. Like, I'm not paying for Tucker's dates. He wants to date some girl. He's going to pay for himself, right? So, and I'm not paying for your date if you're a boy and want to come talk to my girl, right? I'm not going to say you're going to pay for her. So I mean, that's some of the, I think, policies, some of the things. My girls also know that if they want to, if a guy wants to ask them out, then Gabby, what's the deal there?
We tell them they have to come talk to our dad.
What's before they get to that?
Oh, they have to be a Christian.
Okay, good.
Yes. And have a job.
Yeah. Okay, so they're sort of like this. I don't even want to talk to them if they're not there. So if they're not a Christian, don't even bother. If they are, and they can provide and they can do that, then have them come talk to me. But they're gonna come talk to me. Dads, you should do that. You should do that. Do these guys just have free access to your kids? No way. No way. And let me tell you, if my son wants to ask out one of your daughters, I don't care if it's your policy. You're going to get a phone call, or somehow my son's going to come talk to you and say, I'd like to ask your daughter out. Is that okay? Okay? Because I think it's become very much about, hey, the child can do anything they want, and they're old enough and they're mature enough. No, they're not. They need you to coach them through this. They need you to help them through this. So yeah, we've got policies, if you will, but they're hopefully principles that we've just put around the edges of this thing to say, look, there's a readiness factor that we want to see in your lives before we allow that to happen. Okay, next question. Is it wrong that I only want to adopt and not have any natural born children because all of the orphans in the world? Well, the Bible says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and we also know there's a lot of big problems with unwanted children out there that need to be adopted. I mean, there are literally hundreds of thousands of children just in America that haven't been adopted. So no, all I would say is if that's genuinely all that's behind it, that seems like a good motivation. If there's some other fear of having a natural born child, that's the impetus behind that. I mean, I can see a woman going, I don't want to wreck my body, and I'm not saying that's what's motivating that. Could be that you're older and there's risks involved, but if you're at childbearing age and everything's healthy and all of that, then that's a wonderful gift. That's a wonderful gift, and I'm not sure I would make it either or. Maybe I'd look at it more as both and say, you know what, both of those are really valid, really legitimate things to pursue. You want to add to that, babe?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously having a baby is pretty amazing. Some of you out there, won't be able to, and that is a heartbreak to those of you that struggle with that. And so God is so gracious to give us opportunities to have children in our lives in both ways. And so I think I would agree with Chris. What I would suggest is, don't make any long-term decisions right now. I would just keep the door open, because your heart and mind may change about that, and then you would put yourself in a situation where you wouldn't have had any natural born children and really regret it. So don't make any long-term decisions. I think in that area in particular, you just have to leave your heart and mind open and just see where God's going to lead you down the road, because the way you feel at 20 is not how you're going to feel at 26 and 36 and thereon. And you don't want to miss out on those years when you could have had a child and you don't have one. Yeah, every child's a gift for sure, no question about it.
Yeah. Next question. When should I talk to my kids about sex? Again, I think it depends on your child. But here's what I would say, parents. They're going to find out about it earlier than you can imagine. So I think you have to have the discussion at some point. And I don't remember the exact ages of my children. Tucker was probably 10. I took him to a Taco Bell. Had a really awesome, I wish I could have had a video camera there. No kidding. It was so awesome to watch his eyes. But I didn't just do it to be funny. I did it because I needed Tucker to know. I knew he was heading into a grade where there's a very good chance. I mean, he went to Foothill Christian School, and kids, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's a great school, and we have good kids there, but it doesn't mean that they don't talk about these things, right? So I'm like, okay, well, we need to have this conversation, and so we did. And it wasn't, it doesn't need to be dirty. It just needs to be, but it needs to be frank. And dads, I know some of you are like, well, I don't like talking about that stuff. Well, get over it, and don't just leave that up to mom. Your son needs you to lead him. I've let Michelle can talk to the girls, and I talk to Tucker, and for the most part, I think we were pretty deliberate about when we did it. I think there's some of our kids that had started to hear, like, now what is this thing? And that sounds like that's an ucky word, I think, or whatever, and they just need to know. And sincerely, probably around that 10-year-old age, depending on the maturity of your child, they're going to start hearing things at school. The question is, who do you want to define the conversation? You or their friends? Right? So define it. Define it. Say, here's what it is. Here's what's going on. And we want to help you with that. Some of schools even know this, right? You're going to have the your body's changing conversation, right? And the different things that are happening, and they're going to pull the girls and the boys apart. But I don't think it has to be, I don't think you have to go, well, the school will do it. In fact, I don't think you should. I think it ought to be, let me tell you, and let me tell you why. And let me tell you biblically, this is a gift to a mommy and a daddy in a marriage. It's not something we just give away, right? And you can go to the Proverbs and you can show them. I mean, just read Proverbs 1 through 10 sometime. You're going to run into all kinds of things to talk about. And Proverbs 1 through 10, by the way, are messages to kids in the home. My son, listen to me. Don't give your heart to the immoral woman. Okay, my son, if they entice you, don't go with them. And so you're talking to your kids about this stuff. And again, this is part of you having a relationship where you can have those kinds of conversations. Baby, do you want to? I was
going to say, you just want to be proactive, and just again, it's all about talking to your kids, having a relationship with them, and communicating with them. It's really important to be able to be open and talk about that stuff. And you've got, all of our kids have a different story of how it came about with them. Gabby's is probably one of my favorites. Tell them what happened.
Okay. I was actually a total PK answer. I was reading my Bible, and I came across a story of Lot and his daughters.
And then Rachel and
it was Lot and his daughters, and they wanted to have a baby, and they said that the word was making love, and I was like, Mom, what's that? And so
she was 9.
Yeah,
I wasn't really okay. I have to admit, I wasn't that ready, but I remember her asking me that. Now Chris was already in bed, and I was like, Babe, she just asked the question. I'll see you in about an hour. So. And we got some materials that helped us. There's some great books out there with a Christian perspective. I got mine from Focus on the Family, which is a radio ministry. And there's they start, at age 3 and 4 and all the way up to 14. I think there's another really great program out there called Passage to Purity, where some of my friends have done that, where they literally take, when it's about time and your kids are maybe going into middle school or high school, where you can take them away for a weekend and talk about not just sex, but about purity and all those things that go along with it, because it's not just a one-faceted thing, right? As a believer, there's multi-facets to it. And then I had one kid that somebody trumped me on it, and it was painful. It was not what I wanted to have happen. And someone else at school, it literally was the same week that my kid, I was going to be talking to. It was Berkeley, actually, and I was going to be talking to Berkeley about it, and somebody trumped me. But it was a great. Do you want to speak to that real quick? It was a great opportunity for us.
It's like I know.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to give you a chance to talk if you want to talk. But sorry, Berkeley. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm really sorry. I'll give you some space now. So, but it was all of those are learning processes, and if that's happened to your kid, Don't freak out about it. Don't panic. Just pick up where you left off and talk about how that made you sad or it grieved you that they found that another way, and then make it right. That's all you can do. And it was a great learning opportunity for her. I had to talk to the other parent. That was not easy, but we all together, because we were all friends, it worked out just fine. So don't look at anything as a mistake like that. Again, it's an opportunity to minister to your kids.
Good. So we can do one more.
Sorry,
Give me. Go.
Dating is a waste of time. Dating is a waste of time.
Dating is a waste of time.
Dating is a waste of time.
It's a good chant. Next one. As pastors' kids have been difficult to make your faith your own. Go ahead.
For me, I think that this past summer was when I really actually made my faith my own. Up until, I don't know, maybe my freshman year, I kind of took church for granted. I was just like, okay, this is what I do on the weekends. It's not really, it's not that I look forward to it in the sense that I look forward to a social event. It wasn't really, I looked forward to the things of God. But my sophomore year, I feel like God really just started to move in my life. And then just another God thing, we found out about this awesome camp. It was called Worldview Academy. And I went away for 1 week this summer, and it honestly changed my life. Mm-hmm. It was just something that strengthened my faith. It helped me learn about stories that let me learn about see new takes on stories I've heard since I was 4, like Noah and the Ark, and even just things that had just happened in history. But making my faith my own, it's been a real journey. I mean, my freshman year, I made mistakes that I really got a rude awakening. It was actually on Good Friday of 2012, or no,
2011.
2011. And it was just like I confronted my parents and was like, listen, I need to come home. My faith is not as strong as I would like it to be, and God really, thankfully, moved in my life before any damage was really done. So that's what's really finally made my faith my own. Mm-hmm. So,
good. Berkeley, yeah.
Well, I'd say I'm still pretty young, so I'd say my faith, it's been hard because it's like you feel like so much is expected of you from your parents and from everyone. Like everyone's like, is it hard being the pastor's kid? And you're just like, I don't really know how to answer that. Could you ask me more specifically, please? But yeah, it's been hard to make my faith my own, but I'm really working on it, I'd say. Even now I'm working on trying to grow closer to God. And I didn't go with Tucker to Worldview. I think I'm going next year. Mm-hmm. But I went to Pondo this year, which was with the junior high and high school here. And it was really good there. Tucker can attest to that too. The preacher was really good. And one night we all wrote down these things that were just burden on our hearts. And we put them in this jar at the front of the stage. And we were there was a lot of emotionalness. And the preacher, he just burned them all right in our faces. And we're like, oh my gosh, it's just like a burden taken away. And that's what Jesus does for us. So
that's good. Yeah. That's awesome. Good. I'll tell you what, baby, why don't you pray? Why don't you pray for the families here? And, Gracie, were you wanting to say something? Okay, all right, you got 30 seconds.
Okay,
Go.
It's, okay, about my faith. My parents helped me a lot. I think it's kind of a half and half. Some of my parents, I think they share some of my faith with me. If that makes sense. And I have some of my faith, but it's kind of hard to make my faith my own because I'm just like a child right now. So, I need help with that. So,
yeah, that's good. All right.
And that's what we do, right?
Why don't you pray for the families and kids while Mommy's praying? Would you just take these stools down and we'll get this up here. And thank you, guys. Thank you.